Hey guys, it's Relaxing Whisper, and today I'm going to be doing a continuation of the book Welcome to Deadhouse by R.L. Stine. And I'm going to be reading chapters 6 through 10. Chapter 6. That night, I was smiling to myself as I fluffed up my pillow and slid into my bed. I was thinking about how terrified Josh had been that afternoon, how frightened he looked even after I came prancing down the stairs, perfectly okay. How angry he was that I'd fooled him. Of course, Mom and Dad didn't think it was funny. They were both nervous and upset because the moving van had just arrived, an hour late. They forced Josh and me to call a truce. No more scaring each other. It's hard not to get scared in this creepy old place, Josh muttered. But we reluctantly agreed not to play any more jokes on each other if we could possibly help it. The men, complaining about the rain, started carrying all our furniture. Josh and I helped show them where we wanted stuff in our rooms. They dropped my dresser on the stairs, but it only got a small scratch. The furniture looked strange and small in this big house. Josh and I tried to stay out of the way while Mom and Dad worked all day, arranging things, emptying cartons, putting clothes away. Mom even managed to get the curtains hung in my room. What a day. Now, a little after 10 o'clock, trying to get to sleep for the first time in my new room, I turned onto my side, then onto my back. Even though this was my old bed, I couldn't get comfortable. Everything seemed so different, so wrong. The bed didn't face the same direction as in my old bedroom. The walls were bare. I hadn't had time to hang any of my posters. The room seemed so large and empty. The shadows seemed so much darker. My back started to itch, and then I suddenly felt itchy all over. The bed is filled with bugs, I thought, sitting up. But of course, that was ridiculous. It was my same old bed, with clean sheets. I forced myself to settle back down and closed my eyes. Sometimes, when I can't get to sleep, I count silently by twos, picturing each number in my mind as I think. It usually helps to clear my mind so that I can drift off to sleep. I tried it now, burying my face in the pillow, picturing the numbers rolling past. 4, 6, 8. I yawned loudly, still wide awake at 2:20. I'm going to be awake forever, I thought. I'm never going to be able to sleep in this new room. But then I must have drifted off without realizing it. I don't know how long I slept. An hour or two at most. It was a light, uncomfortable sleep. Then something woke me. I sat straight up, startled. Despite the heat of the room, I felt cold all over. Looking down to the end of the bed, I saw that I had kicked off the sheet and light blanket. With a groan, I reached down for them, but then froze. I heard whispers. Someone was whispering across the room. Who's there? My voice was a whisper, too, tiny and frightened. I grabbed the covers and pulled them up to my chin. I heard more whispers. The room came into focus as my eyes adjusted to the dim light. The curtains, the long sheer curtains from my old room that my mother had hung that afternoon, were fluttering at the window. So, that explains the whispers. The billowing curtains must have woken me up. A soft, gray light floated in from outside. The curtains cast moving shadows on the foot of my bed. Yawning, I stretched and climbed out of bed. I felt chilled all over as I crept across the wooden floor to close the window. As I came near, the curtains stopped billowing and floated back into place. I pushed them aside and reached out to close the window. Oh! I uttered a soft cry when I realized that the window was closed. But how could the curtains flutter like that with the window closed? I stood there for a while, staring at the grays of the night. There wasn't much of a draft. The windows seemed pretty airtight. Had I imagined the curtains billowing? Were my eyes playing tricks on me? Yawning, I hurried back through the strange shadows to my bed and pulled the covers up as high as they would go. "Amanda, stop scaring yourself," I scolded. When I fell back to sleep a few minutes later, I had the ugliest, most terrifying dream. I dreamed that we were all dead. Mom, Dad, Josh, and me. At first, I saw us sitting around the dinner table in the new dining room. The room was very bright, so bright I couldn't see our faces very well. They were just a bright white blur. But then, slowly, everything came into focus, and I could see that beneath our hair we had no faces. Our skin was gone, and only our gray-green skulls were left. Bits of flesh clung to the bony cheeks. There were only deep, black sockets where my eyes had been. The four of us, all dead, sat eating in silence. Our dinner plates, I saw, were filled with small bones. A big platter at the center of the table was piled high with gray-green bones, human-looking bones. And then, in this dream, our disgusting meal was interrupted by a loud knocking on the door, an insistent pounding that grew louder and louder. It was Kathy, my friend from back home. I could see her at our front door, pounding on it with both fists. I wanted to go answer the door. I wanted to run from the dining room and open the door and greet Kathy. I wanted to talk to Kathy. I wanted to tell her what had happened to me, to explain that I was dead and that my face had fallen away. I wanted to see Kathy so badly, but I couldn't get up from the table. I tried and tried, but I couldn't get up. The pounding on the door grew louder and louder until it was deafening, but I just sat there with my gruesome family, picking up bones from my dinner plate and eating them. I woke up with a start, the horror of the dream still with me. I could still hear the pounding in my ears. I shook my head, trying to chase the dream away. It was morning. I could tell from the blue of the sky outside the window. Oh no. The curtains, they were billowing again. flapping noisily as they blew into the room. I sat up and stared. The window was still closed. Chapter 7. I'll take a look at the window. There must have been a draft or leak or something, Dad said at breakfast. He shoveled in another mouthful of scrambled eggs and ham. But Dad, it was weird. I insisted, feeling scared. The curtains were billowing like crazy, and the window was closed. There might be a pane missing, Dad suggested. Amanda is a pane, Josh cracked, his idea of a really witty joke. Don't start with your sister, Mom said, putting her plate down on the table and dropping into her chair. She looked tired. Her black hair, usually carefully put back, was disheveled. She tugged at the belt of her bathrobe. Whew, I don't think I slept 2 hours last night. Neither did I said, sighing. I kept thinking about that boy would show up in my room again. Amanda, you've really got to stop this, Mom said sharply. Boys in your room, curtains blowing. You have to realize that you're nervous, and your imagination is working overtime. But Mom, I started. Maybe a ghost was behind the curtains, Josh said, teasing. He raised up his hands and made a ghostly "ooh" wail. Whoa, Mom put a hand on Josh's shoulder. Remember what you promised about scaring each other. It's going to be hard for all of us to adjust to this place, Dad said. You may have dreamed about the curtains billowing, Amanda. You said you had bad dreams, right? The terrifying nightmare flashed back into my mind. Once again, I saw the big platter of bones on the table. I shivered. It's so damp in here, Mom said. A little sunshine will help dry the place out, Dad said. I peered out the window. The sky had turned solid gray. Trees seemed to spread darkness over our backyard. Where's Petey? I asked. Out back, Mom replied, swallowing a mouthful of eggs. He got up early too. Couldn't sleep, I guess, so I let him out. What are we doing today? Josh asked. He always needed to know the plan for the day, every detail, mainly so he could argue about it. Your father and I still have a lot of unpacking to do, Mom said, glancing to the back hallway, which was cluttered with unopened cartons. You two can explore the neighborhood, see what you can find out, see if there are any other kids around your age. In other words, you want us to get lost, I said. Mom and Dad both laughed. You're very smart, Amanda. But I want to help unpack my stuff, Josh whined. I knew he'd argue with the plan, just like always. Go get dressed and take a long walk, Dad said. Take Petey with you, okay? And take a leash for him. I left one by the front stairs. What about our bikes? Why can't we ride our bikes? Josh asked. They're buried in the back of the garage, Dad told him. You'll never be able to get to them. Besides, you have a flat tire. If I can't ride my bike, I'm not going out, Josh insisted, crossing his arms in front of his chest. Mom and Dad had to argue with him, then threaten him. Finally, he agreed to go for a short walk. I finished my breakfast, thinking about Kathy and my other friends back at home. I wondered what the kids were like in Dark Falls. I wondered if I'd be able to find new friends, real friends. I volunteered to do the breakfast dishes since Mom and Dad had so much work to do. The warm water felt soothing on my hands as I sponged the dishes clean. I guess maybe I'm weird. I like washing dishes. Behind me, from somewhere in the front of the house, I could hear Josh arguing with Dad. I could just barely make out the words over the trickle of the tap water. "Your basketball is packed in one of these cartons," Dad was saying. Then Josh said something. Then Dad said, "How should I know which one?" Then Josh said something. Then Dad said, "No, I don't have time to look now. Believe it or not, your basketball isn't at the top of my list." I stacked the last dish onto the counter to drain and looked for a dish towel to dry my hands. There were none in sight. I guess they didn't see. They hadn't been unpacked yet. Wiping my hands on the front of my robe, I headed for the stairs. "I'll be dressed in 5 minutes," I called to Josh, who was still arguing with Dad in the living room. "Then we can go out." I started up the front stairs and then stopped. Above me on the landing stood a strange girl about my age, with short black hair. She was smiling down at me. Not a warm smile, not a friendly smile, but the coldest, most frightening smile I had ever seen. Chapter 8. A hand touched my shoulder. I spun around. It was Josh. "I'm not going for a walk unless I can take my basketball," he said. "Josh, please." I looked back up at the landing, and the girl was gone. I felt cold all over. My legs were all trembly. I grabbed the banister. "Dad, come here, please," I called. Josh's face filled with alarm. "Hey, I didn't do anything," he shouted. "No, it's not you," I said, and called Dad again. "Amanda, I'm kind of busy," Dad said, appearing below at the foot of the stairs, already perspiring from uncrating living room stuff. "Dad, I saw somebody," I told him. "Up there, a girl," I pointed. "Amanda, please," he replied, making a face. "Stop seeing things, okay? There's no one in this house except the 4 of us, and maybe a few mice." "Mice?" Josh asked with sudden interest. "Really? Where?" "Dad, I didn't imagine it," I said, my voice cracking. I was really hurt that he didn't believe me. "Amanda, look up there," Dad said, gazing up to the landing. "What do you see?" I followed his gaze. There was a pile of my clothes on the landing. Mom must have just unpacked them. "It's just clothes," Dad said impatiently. "It's not a girl, it's clothes." He rolled his eyes. "Sorry," I said quietly. I repeated it as I started up the stairs. "Sorry." But I didn't really feel sorry. I felt confused and still scared. Was it possible that I thought a pile of clothes was a smiling girl? No, I don't think so. I'm not crazy, and I have really good eyesight. So then, what's going on? I opened the door to my room, turned on the ceiling light, and saw the curtains billowing in front of the bay window. Oh no, not again, I thought. I hurried over to them. This time, the window was open. Who opened it? Mom, I guessed. Warm, wet air blew into the room. The sky was heavy and gray. It smelled like rain. Turning to my bed, I had another shock. Someone had laid out an outfit for me. A pair of faded jeans and a pale blue sleeveless t-shirt. They were spread out side by side at the foot of my bed. Who had put them there, Mom? I stood at the doorway and called to her. Mom? Mom? Did you pick out clothes for me? I could hear her shout something from downstairs, but I couldn't make out the words. Calm down, Amanda, I told myself. Calm down. Of course Mom pulled the clothes out. Of course Mom put them there. From the doorway, I heard whispering in my closet. Whispering and hushed giggling from behind the closet door. This was the last straw. What's going on here? I yelled at the top of my lungs. I stormed over to the closet and pulled open the door. Frantically, I pushed clothes out of the way. No one in there. Mice, I thought. Had I heard the mice that Dad was talking about? I've got to get out of here, I said aloud. The room, I realized, was driving me crazy. No, I was driving myself crazy. Imagining all these weird things. There was a logical explanation for everything. Everything. As I pulled my jeans and fastened them, I said the word logical over and over in my mind. I said it so many times, it didn't sound like a real word anymore. Calm down, Amanda. Calm down. I took a deep breath and held it to 10. Boo. Josh, cut it out. You didn't scare me, I told him, sounding more cross than I had meant to. Let's get out of here, he said, staring at me from the doorway. This place gives me the creeps. Huh. You too, I exclaimed. What's your problem? He started to say something, then stopped. He suddenly looked embarrassed. Forget it, he muttered. No, tell me, I insisted. What were you going to say? He kicked it at the floor molding. I had a really creepy dream last night, he finally admitted, looking past me to the fluttering curtains at the window. A dream? I remembered my horrible dream. Yeah, there were these two boys in my room, and they were mean. What did they do? I asked. I don't remember, Josh said, avoiding my eyes. I just remember they were scary. And what happened? I asked, turning to the mirror to brush my hair. I woke up, he said, and then added impatiently, Come on, let's go. Did the boys say anything to you? I asked. No, I don't think so, he answered thoughtfully. They just laughed. Laughed? Well, giggled, sort of, Josh said. I don't want to talk about it anymore, he snapped. Are we going for this dumb walk or not? Okay, I'm ready, I said, putting down my brush, taking one last look in the mirror. Let's go on this dumb walk. I followed him down the hall. As we passed the stack of clothes on the landing, I thought about the girl I had seen standing there, and I thought about the boy at the window when we first arrived, and the two boys Josh had seen in his dream. I decided it proved that Josh and I were both really nervous about moving to this new place. Maybe Mom and Dad were right. We were letting our imaginations run away with us. It had to be our imaginations. I mean, what else could it be? Chapter 9. A few seconds later, we stepped into the backyard to get Petey. He was as glad to see us as ever, leaping on us with his muddy paws, yapping excitedly, running in frantic circles through the leaves. It cheered me up just to see him. It was hot and muggy, even though the sky was gray. There was no wind at all. The heavy old trees stood as still as statues. We headed down the gravel driveway toward the street. Our sneakers kicked at the dead brown leaves. Petey running in zigzags at our sides, first in front of us, then behind. At least Dad hasn't asked us to rake all these old leaves, Josh said. He will, I warned. I don't think he's unpacked the rake yet. Josh made a face. We stood at the curb, looking up at our house. The 2 second-floor bay windows staring back at us like eyes. The house next door, I noticed for the first time, was about the same size as ours, except it was shingle instead of brick. The curtains in the living room were drawn shut. Some of the upstairs windows were shuttered. Tall trees cast the neighborhood house into darkness, too. Which way? Josh asked, tossing a stick for Petey to chase. I pointed up the street. The school is up that way, I said. Let's check it out. The road sloped uphill. Josh picked up a small tree branch from the side of the road and used it as a walking stick. Petey kept trying to chew on it while Josh walked. We didn't see anyone on the street or in any of the front yards we passed. No cars went by. I was beginning to think the whole town was deserted until the boy stepped out from behind a low ledge. He popped out so suddenly, but Josh and I stopped in our tracks. "Hi," he said shyly, giving us a little wave. "Hi," Josh and I answered at the same time. Then, before we could pull him back, Petey ran up to the boy, sniffed his sneakers, and began snarling and barking. The boy stepped back and raised his hands as if he were protecting himself. He looked really frightened. "Petey, stop," I cried. Josh grabbed the dog and picked him up, but he kept growling. "He doesn't bite," I told the boy. "He usually doesn't bark either. I'm sorry." "That's okay," the boy said, staring at Petey, who was squirming to get out of Josh's arms. "He probably smells something on me." "Petey, stop," I shouted. The dog wouldn't stop squirming. "You don't want the leash, do you?" The boy had short, wavy blonde hair and very pale blue eyes. He had a funny turned-up nose that seemed out of place on his serious-looking face. He was wearing a maroon, long-sleeved sweatshirt despite the mugginess of the day, and black, straight-legged jeans. He had a blue baseball cap stuffed into the back pocket of his jeans. "I'm Amanda Benson," I said, "and this is my brother Josh." Josh hesitantly put Petey back on the ground. The dog yipped once, stared up at the boy, whimpered softly, then sat down on the street and began to scratch himself. "I'm Ray Thurston," the boy said, stuffing his hands into his jeans pockets, still staring warily at Petey. He seemed to relax a little, though, seeing that the dog had lost interest in barking and growling at him. I suddenly realized that Ray looked familiar. Where had I seen him before? Where? I stared at him until I remembered, and then I gasped in sudden fright. Ray was the boy in my room, the boy in the window. You, I stammered accusingly. You were in our house. He looked confused. Huh? You were in my room, right? I insisted. He laughed. I don't get it, he said. In your room? Petey raised his head and gave a low growl in Ray's direction. Then he went back to his serious scratching. I thought I saw you, I said, beginning to feel a little doubtful. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe. I haven't been in your house in a long time, Ray said, looking down warily at Petey. A long time? Yeah, I used to live in your house, he replied. Huh, Josh and I stared at him in surprise. Our house? Ray nodded. When we first moved here, he said. He picked up a flat pebble and heaved it down the street. Petey growled, started to chase it, changed his mind, and plopped back down on the street, his stub of a tail wagging excitedly. Heavy clouds lowered across the sky. It seemed to grow darker. Where do you live now? I asked. Ray tossed another stone, then pointed up the road. Did you like our house? Josh asked Ray. Yeah, it was okay, Ray told him. Nice and shady. You liked it? Josh cried. I think it's gross. It's so dark and... Petey interrupted. He decided to start barking at Ray again, running up till he was a few inches in front of Ray, then backing away. Ray took a few cautious steps back to the edge of the curb. Josh pulled the leash from out of his pockets of his shorts. Sorry, Petey, he said. I held the growling dog while Josh attached the leash to the collar. He's never done this before, really, I said, apologizing to Ray. The leash seemed to confuse Petey. He tugged against it, pulled Josh across the street, but at least he stopped barking. Let's do something, Josh said impatiently. Like what? Ray asked, relaxing again now that Petey was on a leash. We all thought for a while. Maybe we could go to your house, Josh suggested to Ray. Ray shook his head. No, I don't think so, he said. Not now, anyway. Where is everyone? I asked, looking up and down the empty street. It's really dead around here, huh? He chuckled. Yeah, I guess you could say that, he said. Want to go to the playground behind the school? Yeah, okay, I agreed. The three of us headed up the street, Ray leading the way, me walking a few feet behind him, Josh holding his tree branch in one hand and the leash in the other, Petey running this way and that, giving Josh a really hard time. We didn't see the gang of kids till we turned the corner. There were 10 or 12 of them, mostly boys, but a few girls too. They were laughing and shouting, shoving each other playfully as they came toward us down the center of the street. Some of them I saw were about my age. The rest were teenagers. They were wearing jeans and dark t-shirts. One of the girls stood out because she had long, straight blonde hair and was wearing green spandex tights. Hey, look, a tall boy with slicked back black hair cried, pointing at us. Seeing Ray, Josh, and me, they grew quiet, but didn't stop moving toward us. A few of them giggled, as if they were enjoying some kind of private joke. The three of us stopped and watched them approach. I smiled and waited to say hi. Petey was pulling at his leash and barking his head off. "Hi, guys," the tall boy with the black hair said, grinning. The others thought this was very funny for some reason. They laughed. The girl in the green tights gave a short, red-haired boy a shove that almost sent him sprawling into me. "How's it going, Ray?" a girl with short black hair asked, smiling at Ray. "Not bad." "Hi, guys," Ray answered. He turned to Josh and me. "These are some of my friends. They're all from the neighborhood." "Hi," I said, feeling awkward. I wished Petey would stop barking and pulling at his leash like that. Poor Josh was having a terrible time holding on to him. "This is George Carpenter," Ray said, pointing to the short, red-haired boy who nodded. "And Jerry Franklin, Karen Somerset, Bill Gregory." He went around the circle, naming each kid. I tried to remember all the names, but of course it was impossible. "Do you like Dark Falls?" one of the girls asked me. "I don't really know," I told her. "It's my first day here, really. It seems nice." Some of the kids laughed at my answer for some reason. "What kind of dog is that?" George Carpenter asked Josh. Josh, holding tight to the leash handle, told him. George stared hard at Percy, studying him, as if he had never seen a dog like Petey before. Karen Somerset, a tall, pretty girl with short blonde hair, came to me, while some of the other kids were admiring Petey. "You know, I used to live in your house," she said softly. "What?" I wasn't sure I heard her correctly. "Let's go to the playground," Ray said, interrupting. No one responded to Ray's suggestion. They grew quiet. Even Petey stopped barking. Had Karen really said that she used to live in our house? I wanted to ask her, but she had stepped back into the circle of kids. The circle. My mouth dropped open as I realized they had formed a circle around Josh and me. I felt a stab of fear. Was I imagining it? Was something going on? They all suddenly looked different to me. They were smiling, but their faces were tense, watchful, as if they expected trouble. Two of them, I noticed, were carrying baseball bats. The girl with the green tights stared at me, looking me up and down, checking me out. No one said a word. The street was silent except for Petey, who was now whimpering softly. I suddenly felt very afraid. Why were they all staring at us like that? Or was my imagination running away with me again? I turned to Ray, who was still beside me. He didn't seem at all troubled, but he didn't return my gaze. "Hey guys," I said, "what's going on?" I tried to keep it light, but my voice was a little shaky. I looked over at Josh. He was busy soothing Petey and hadn't noticed that things had changed. The two boys with the baseball bats held them up, waist high, and moved forward. I glanced around the circle, feeling the fear tighten in my chest. The circle tightened. The kids were closing in on us. Chapter 10. The black clouds overhead seemed to lower. The air felt heavy and damp. Josh was fussing with Petey's collar and still didn't see what was happening. I wondered if Ray was going to say anything, if he was going to do anything to stop them, but he stayed frozen and expressionless beside me. The circle grew smaller, and the kids closed in. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I took a deep breath and opened my mouth to cry out. "Hey, kids, what's going on?" It was a man's voice calling from outside the circle. Everyone turned to see Mr. Dawes coming quickly toward us, taking long strides as he crossed the street, his open blazer flapping behind him. He had a friendly smile on his face. "What's going on?" he asked again. He didn't seem to realize the gang of kids had been closing in on Josh and me. "We were heading to the playground," George Carpenter told him, twirling the bat in his hands. "You know, to play softball." "Good deal," Mr. Dawes said, pulling down his striped tie, which had blown over his shoulder. He looked up at the darkening sky. "Hope you don't get rained out." Several of the kids backed up. They were standing in small groups of two and three now. The circle had completely broken up. "Is that bat for softball or hardball?" Mr. Dawes asked George. "George doesn't know," another kid replied quickly. "He's never hit anything with it." The kids all laughed. George playfully menaced the kid, pretending to come at him with the bat. Mr. Dawes gave a little wave and started to leave, but then he stopped, and his eyes opened wide with surprise. "Hey," he said, flashing me a friendly smile. "Josh, Amanda, I didn't see you there." "Good morning," I muttered. I was feeling very confused. A moment ago, I'd felt terribly scared. Now everyone was laughing and kidding around. Had I imagined that the kids were moving in on us? Ray and Josh hadn't seemed to notice anything peculiar. Was it just me and my overactive imagination? What would have happened if Mr. Dawes hadn't come along? "How are you two getting along in the new house?" Mr. Dawes asked, smoothing back his wavy blonde hair. "Okay," Josh and I answered together, looking up at Mr. Dawes. Petey began to bark, and I pulled at the leash. Mr. Dawes put an exaggerated hurt expression on his face. "I'm crushed," he said. "Your dog still doesn't like me." He bent over Petey. "Hey dog, listen up." Petey barked back angrily. "He doesn't seem to like anybody today," I told Mr. Dawes apologetically. Mr. Dawes stood back up and shrugged. "Can't win 'em all." He started back to his car, parked a few yards down the street. "I'm heading over to your house," he told Josh and me. "Just wanted to see if there's anything I can do to help your parents. Have fun, kids." I watched him climb into his car and drive away. "He's a nice guy," Ray said. "Yeah," I agreed. I was still feeling uncomfortable, wondering what the kids would do now that Mr. Dawes was gone. Would they form that frightening circle again? No. Everyone started walking, heading down the block to the playground behind the school. They were kidding each other and talking normally, and pretty much ignored Josh and me. I was starting to feel a little silly. It was obvious that they hadn't been trying to scare Josh and me. I must have made the whole thing up in my head. I must have. At least I told myself. I hadn't screamed or made a scene, At least I hadn't made a total fool of myself. The playground was completely empty. I guessed that most kids had stayed inside because of the threatening sky. The playground was a large, flat, grassy field, surrounded on all four sides by a tall metal fence. There were swings and slides at the end nearest to the school building. There were 2 baseball diamonds on the other end. Beyond the fence, I could see a row of tennis courts, also deserted. Josh tied Petey to the fence, then came running over to join the rest of us. The boy named Jerry Franklin made up the teams. Ray and I were on the same team. Josh was on the other. As our team took the field, I felt excited and a little nervous. I'm not the best softball player in the world. I can hit a ball pretty well, but in the field, I'm a complete klutz. Luckily, Jerry sent me out to right field where not many balls are hit. The clouds began to part a little and the sky got lighter. We played 2 full innings. The other team was winning 8-2. I was having fun. I only messed up on 1 play, and I hit a double on my first time at bat. It was fun being with the whole group of kids. They seemed really nice, especially the girl named Karen Somerset, who talked with me while we waited for our turn at bat. Karen had a great smile, even though she wore braces on all her teeth up and down. She seemed very eager to be friends. The sun was coming out as my team started to take the field for the beginning of the 3rd inning. Suddenly, I heard a loud, shrill whistle. I looked around until I saw that it was Jerry Franklin blowing a silver whistle. Everyone came running up to him. "We'd better quit," he said, looking up at the brightening sky. "We promised our folks, remember, that we'd be home for lunch?" I glanced at my watch. It was only 11:30, still early, but to my surprise, no one protested. They all waved to each other and called out farewells, and then began to run. I couldn't believe how fast everyone left. It was as if they were racing or something. Karen ran past me like the others, her head down, a serious expression on her pretty face. Then she stopped suddenly and turned around. "Nice meeting you, Amanda," she called back. "We should get together sometime." "Great," I called to her. "Do you know where I live?" I could hear her answer very well. She nodded, and I thought she said, "Yes, I know it. I used to live in your house." But that couldn't have been what she had said.